Much for joining us, all of you for joining us for this exciting book talk. Before we begin, I have to mention a couple of upcoming events, because I do marketing here and that's what I do. There is still time to buy a ticket for a special appearance by Veronica Roth, and she is best known as the creator of the Divergent series. So she's coming Tuesday to Franklin Event Center. And that is a ticketed event, and you can go online and purchase a ticket and get a book. That's part of the ticket. Then the Des Moines Public Library's Fall Author Series is hosting David Ellis, and he is sharing his latest book, The Best Lies. And that's at Central Library on Wednesday, September 17th at 7 p.m., and we'll be there selling books. And you can also find all the details on our website, or you can pick up a flyer at the register, or you can sign up for our newsletter so that you don't miss any of our events. We also have a very special event in October. We have Nick Offerman from Parks and Rec. He's going to be here to talk about his woodworking projects. And it promises to be a really fun program. It's October 14th. Again, that's a ticketed event, but we've priced it to be very family friendly because he wants lots of kids there. And he calls himself a carnivorous woodworker. I love that. Anyway, now on to today's book talk, which is what you're all here for. The Years of Ripening, Reflections on Aging in Later Life. And Joyce, I can't wait to read it myself. Joyce's book is a sequel to her best-selling book of prayers and poems, Vessels of Love. The Years of Ripening has over 46 essays, a poem to open each chapter, and a discussion guide. It focuses on personal transformation, the wonder and goodness of our hidden self, and ways to claim ever more of the truest reality of our inner being. Joyce is well known for her work as a writer, spiritual midwife, international retreat leader, and conference speaker, and she has authored 36 best-selling books on topics as diverse as grief, midlife spirituality, aging in late life, prayers for every occasion, reflections on nature, and a memoir of walking 450 miles across northern Spain. We have a smattering here of all of her books, well, not all of them, but many of her books, and there are more on the shelves, but I didn't have room to put them all out. So be sure to take a look at her other books as well. While semi-retired, Joyce continues to write and also serves as a companion for others as a spiritual guide. She's a member of the Servite Servants of Mary community and was a volunteer for Hospice for 15 years. She resides in West Des Moines, Iowa, and we are just thrilled to introduce Joyce Rupp.
Thank you, Jan. It's always a privilege, I think, to do any kind of connection with you because I know what a infamous marketing person you are. Thank you for that, really.
Infamous, maybe.
And also, you know, this bookstore, Alice, thank you so much for Beaverdale Books. This bookstore survived COVID, has survived so much, and it's just thriving. And anything I can do to support this is just my gift, really. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot for coming. You know, on this day when it's rather warm outside, that I know there's so many things you could be doing, and I just feel so humbled that you would come and be here. So I really want to share some things from the book. I'm trying to think how to do this. This is my second presentation on it. But not in the book. This is my first in the bookstore because it just came out, you know, a month and a half at the most. And so, anyway, we'll see where it goes. And I'm hoping afterwards that you'll gather your own questions and comments, your connections, because I always learn a lot from people that I'm with. And you'll find when you read the book, there's a lot of stories in there from other people's experiences. that I did get permission to write about, in this day and age of legality. So I wanted to share, how many of you were here for Vessels of Love last year? Okay, not too many. So I will give you just a little background then, how I came to write these 2 books on later life aging. About 2017, I started meeting with a group of women from age 90 to 97. And I wanted to meet with them. They were members of my community, and I just love these women, and I wanted us to reflect on the spirituality of aging. And I thought, well, we'll meet once a month, and I'll get some books, and we'll share chapters from them. And I couldn't find any books that related to the spirituality or the emotional, psychological part of it. I could find a lot on, residences and living wills and finances and all those things, but not on how does what's happening out here affect the inner life. And so then I started writing prayers and some poems for us when we got together, and we kind of just found our way through there for about 5 years, I think we met. And I learned so much from these women, because I was like kind of 76, 77 then, I think, at the time. So I felt like a chick next to these 90-year-olds. I always said to them, I said, I feel so young when I'm with you. But, they were marvelous, and they were so honest about their lives. And so that came about here. And then I interviewed a number of people on aging who were in the last 3 decades of life. So that's kind of how this book has come about. So this book is entirely essays, and I have 1 poem that starts each of the 12 chapters. So I wanted to say a few things about the book in general, and then I'm going to go through some of the chapters, just read a few pieces from it, and I won't keep you here all day, I promise. So, thanks to Jan, I had a conversation with John Busby this past week on Cultural Buzz. And I was so pleased because one of the things he said to me about the book, he said, this isn't just for older people. He said, I hope a lot of younger people will read this book. And I was so glad for him to say that, because I had just come from a friend of mine in his late 70s, and his grandson, who's in college, had been in the house, and he saw the book, and he asked him what it was about. And when he told him, this young man said, I want to read that book, which said so much about his relationship to his grandfather. But I wish I had had this book even when I was 60 and my mother was 84, because I just would have been different about certain things. I think I would have been much more understanding about what she was going through. So a couple of things about the title, The Years of Ripening. Thomas Merton, who I always consider was one of my early spiritual mentors when I was in my 20s, one thing he said, and I've never forgotten, he said, we're always becoming who we already are. And I love that because, we're really born with all the possibilities of becoming this individual. And as we move through life, certain of those qualities, we pick them up and we develop them. But they're never fully developed, and there's always more that we have that can come to life. And so I use the image of a pomegranate. Pomegranates fascinate me, and they have literally hundreds of seeds in just one. And I thought, that is like an older person. We still have all of this possibility in us. It's not at all time just to sit back and say, I'm done. But I think being open to, who am I now, and what can I still develop? And I'll come back to that when I look at the chapter on identity. So, and one last thing about this is that, I tried as much as possible to have a balance in the book between what's positive about older age and what is challenging about older age. And I have to be honest, when I was in my 70s, I couldn't think of a lot of positive things. I was thinking, what's ahead for me? But once I started exploring it and I heard from older people, I thought, there's a lot of positive things. And I'm 82 now, and I can tell you, every time a plane goes over, I think of one positive thing, especially for being older. I'm not in that plane. Thank you, Jesus. I'm not up in that. I traveled so much for my work. I hardly felt like I was a resident in Des Moines. And I was always pressed, like, get another talk done, and get to the airport and travel and meet the people, which I loved. And then get back home and then start again. And so there was that pressure and stress. And I don't have that now. And it is such a freedom. You know, I still have lots to do. I'm still very active, but I don't have that on my shoulders anymore. And that to me is a really big thing. And so one of the moves I talk about in the book is that as we get older, we move from doing into being. And in our American culture, everything militates against that. You're to be extroverted, you're to be as busy as you can be, you need to always be going and going. And if you say to people, you know, I didn't do anything, I just read a novel all day, they're like, you had time to do that, you know, and you chose to do that, and you could do that. But that's the kind of thing that I think there's just a whole movement away from the doing to the being. And the other piece of that, and I have a friend who shared this with me, he said, you know, it's really moving from being on stage to being in the audience. And I really like that. You know, and that's a big move. We don't have to produce anymore. We don't have to prove we're successful or feel we are. We just get to be who we are. And that is such a gift. And there's other gifts too that I might mention along the way, but for that. So I want to move into then some of the, just mention a few things from some of the chapters in here. And in the first chapter, which is a time to, it's the introduction first of all, and then the first chapter. And I want to read the first essay. There are 4 short essays in each of the chapters. And this first one, I write about elderhood. I just want us to explore, you know, what does it mean to be in elderhood? And for me, age-wise, it means anywhere from about mid-70 on. You know, it depends. Some people might feel they're that way when they're in their late 60s, and some might not feel that way till they're 85. But it's in that kind of wide range. So I started the chapter, Entering Elderhood, with a quote from Friedrich Buechner. I don't know if you know Friedrich Buechner's work, but he was such a wise man. And this is what he wrote. Listen to your life. See it for the fathomless mystery that it is. In the boredom and pain of it, no less than in the excitement and gladness. Touch, taste, smell your way to the holy and hidden heart of it. That's what I think elderhood is about, you know, exploring the fathomless mystery that Buechner talks about, and doing it in a way that we're not pressed and hurried, but that we're just yearning to know more about life and about who we are. And so I'll read you just a little one paragraph from that chapter. In elderhood, the external world becomes the teacher of the deeper self and a superb catalyst for personal transformation. The inner world summons meaning to surface from those experiences. This is what the last decades open up more widely for older persons. Keener insight, sharpened awareness about becoming a transparent and loving human being. When gracious elders die, they leave behind a world with more love in it than when they arrived. And truly, you know, John Busby, they said, well, I bet you had a plan for this book. And I said, you're right, I did, you know. But I wanted to really talk about elderhood first and more of life experiences. But what the book, I really want the book to be about in the last half of the book is this. It's really about inner transformation and all of its leading up to that, and how does that happen for us. So that's the chapter on elderhood. And then the next chapter is on anxiety and uncertainty, because I've known older people who've been so at peace with their lives, and I've known older people that fret and stew, and they're worried and they're irritable, and they seem to never be at peace. There's always something to be fearful about. And so I wrote about a lot of that. And I have a lot of my own examples in this, so I'm not just talking about other people. So I want to read you a little piece about when I turned 80. I decided I did not want people sending me, cards that had black balloons on it, and people that were, like 3/4 dead and all that. And so I decided to throw myself a birthday party. And anyway, and I did it. But here's a little lead up to what happened, and because I'm not really a real fearful person, but I was astounded at this. So, one of the worrying times occurred when I entered my 8th decade. I wanted to rejoice in the wonder, goodness, and beauty of my life. About 3 months before my birthday, I made plans to throw a party for myself. I laughed about how ludicrous that seemed, but I also enjoyed the thought of having longtime friends and siblings come together for an evening of fun. How surprised I was that just a few weeks into planning, I started worrying about highly unlikely catastrophes. Be careful not to break a bone. Watch out for other drivers that don't crash my car. Maybe there will be a storm that evening. Electricity will go off. I could get COVID again. The food caterer won't show up. The worry that finally led me out of that twisted thinking was the day I briefly choked on a salad. My first thought, oh, what a great way to die before the party. So anyway, after I started breathing again, I decided I had to do an affirmation about that birthday party and get rid of that. So this is just a line I said every day. The birthday party is a success and goes wonderfully well. And it did. Everything was okay. And I would have spent all that energy into worrying about something that wasn't going to come about. But I think that is, a part of, it can be a part of growing older. And then in that same chapter, I have an essay called The Best Medicine, and it's about laughter. And I just think laughter is so important any time in our lives, but I think certainly as we get older, there's a lot to laugh about if we let ourselves. I have a friend in Arizona. He's 94 now. And last year he wrote to me and he said that he was so anxious because he had lost his phone. And he said he went out, he got back from an appointment, he went out to his car and he looked again for his phone. He couldn't find it. He went back in the house. He went to a car again that night, couldn't look for it. The next morning, he called a friend. She came over and found the phone right away. It turns out that every time he went in his car, he sat on the phone when he was looking. Anyway, so that does happen to us. So if you lose your phone, look everywhere for it. Okay. And then I have a chapter on the gifts of elderhood, and I've talked about some of those already. I think life experience is so valuable as we get older, and I thought about that real specifically last Monday. I had a medical appointment, and he wanted to set up another appointment 4 weeks from then. And so I went ahead and set it up, and I knew when I set it up, it was 8:30 in the morning, and I was flying back from Portland the night before and getting in supposedly at 8:30. And as I'm driving home, I thought, this is my old brain. Well, I could just, maybe I'll go stand by earlier to be sure I get in, because, flights might not get in, and I might not get in till the next day. By the time I got home, I thought, why am I doing this to myself? Call and set the appointment for 3 days later, and I did. And it was no big deal. But in the past, I would have just gone ahead with that. But I thought about what pressure does for me out of my life experience, and I don't want to do that again, So that's just one example of that. Then the next one is on loss, which certainly is significant amount of as we get older. One of the chapters I have is called The Depleting Pond. And that image for me is that our life when we're going through it younger, it's just it's full of water, but it just keeps shrinking, And when you get to be 80, you look ahead and you don't know how much there is left in that pond. There was a lot in the past, and I think needing to face that reality and how will I be with it. Then the one that's really meaningful to me is the essay on the crowd grows bigger. And that's the crowd of people who have died who were friends and relatives of mine. That is really the hardest thing for me for my aging. I started making a list one day of all the people that I cared about, and I thought, this is unbelievable, But it goes on, and so we have to be attentive to that and what it does for us. And then the last essay in that section on loss is called Tabernacles of Absence. And I got that phrase from the Irish author John O'Donoghue. I like his work so much. And this essay really is on loneliness. I had no idea how lonely my mom was when she got to be in her late 70s, early 80s. My mom died at 84. But she would say to me every once in a while, all my friends are gone. And I think, well, she has us, and she's got her children and so and so. But her peers, the people that she could relate to and had a history with, they were gone. And she lived alone, and my mother never complained, never begged us to be there for her. She was not that way. But she was lonely, and that's what John O'Donoghue is writing about in this book called Walking with Wonder. John O'Donoghue, he said, older people seem to accumulate more and more absences. He then reminds his readers that loneliness affects more than those in late life. And this is his quote. But any life that is vigorous and open to challenge and compassion and the real activity of thought knows that as we journey, we create many tabernacles of absence within us. I thought that was a powerful metaphor, a tabernacle of absence. And I thought, a tabernacle is really a sacred place. And I thought, so that empty space of loneliness can be a sacred space. I mean, how are we with that loneliness, and it's not just older people. I was thinking about this last week. I have some people who are single who come to me for spiritual guidance, and it's a great loneliness for them, in that their friends have grandchildren, and they have a pretty good idea who will be there for them when they are in their last stages of life. But a single person, it's different. It's very different, and just that attentiveness and that compassion for single people. But anyhow, loneliness is a part of all of that. So, okay, much my time here. Then I have a chapter on gratitude, and that was such an easy chapter to write. All the essays, it's so many aspects of gratitude that I could write about. The next chapter is physical decline, and the first chapter I have, and let me find that, is about the physical ailments that people have. When I was young, I could never understand why people would talk about all these things, And now I'm meeting with friends, and guess what we talk about? Yeah, bladder and bunions, eyes and ears, hips and hearts, that kind of thing. Anyway, I want to read this. This is again an experience from my life. I'm not really one that. I spend a lot of time, a lot of attention in what's not working well, even though I do try to be compassionate with my body. But I realized when this happened that I'm a lot more aware of what might go wrong. So here's what happened. While I'm sitting in the booth for lunch with friends my own age, I feel this throbbing in my upper thigh, and I think, now what is that? What is running awry there? Could a blood vessel be breaking? I unobtrusively put my hand on my thigh, thinking, I better pay attention to this. As my hand touches my thigh, it dawns on me that I have my mobile phone on vibrate and I can't stop. And a call is coming in. I don't know if it showed on my face, but it was like I wanted to really laugh a lot. Anyway, a reminder that underneath the surface of calm acceptance I usually have regarding my health, this voice lurks. Be aware, anything can happen at any time to any part of your body or mind. And I think that is there for older people. It does, they're always saying, look out, you don't fall, be aware of this, and so there's unconsciously, I think it's there for us. So, okay, a few more things here in the table of contents. So I have a chapter on death. You know, when I was doing interviews, I was pleasantly surprised at how calm and peaceful the majority of older people were thinking about their death. They didn't have a lot of fear. They were pretty calm about it. Most of the people had a belief in the afterlife, but not all of them. But they were quite calm. And so last year I was in Omaha and I was speaking with chaplains and hospice workers. And I was talking about this aspect. And one of the chaplains said that was what she had found. She said, people who are older are not concerned about how they're going to die, but they're very concerned about having peace. And I thought that was a really good insight, and to be aware of that. So I just talk about how I've come, in that chapter, how I've come to be peaceful pretty much about my own death and that sort of thing. The next chapter is on hope and purpose. You know, it's just so vital for everyone to have a purpose. And if you read Vessels of Love, you know, I have a poem in that book, and it's on one of our members of my community, Rosalie. Rosalie, I just loved Rosalie. She was 96, I think, when she died. She was probably about 93 at this time. And, you know, she had COPD, and she had a lot of arthritis, and, you know, she had a lot of physical things wrong with her. Her mind was still very good. But, you know, for her to find a purpose in her life at that stage, I think everybody needs a purpose. Well, I was walking past one of her rooms one day, and I saw there she was, and there was a bird cage, and she was cleaning out the bird cage. She had these big, way too big rubber gloves on, and she was so happy that she was doing something, you know, that had value to it, that had meaning to it for her. And I just find that it's so true. I have an aunt who's going to be 90 next year. She lives in Oregon. And when she moved to a retirement center last year, she said one of her main goals or purposes was to help people enjoy life through laughter. So every day she sends a cartoon out to anybody that wants it. And really, they're quite hilarious. But that's her purpose. She found a purpose for herself, and I'm writing in this section that it doesn't have to be a big purpose in it, but we need to call people, I think, to know what their purpose is, you know, and it might be something as simple as getting people to laugh each day. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be doing something necessarily. And then. Yeah, I want to move on then to talk about this. It's the last few chapters that I think are most important. This is on identity on page 163 if you happen to have the book. I'm going to read the poem. There's a poem that starts each of the chapters, and this one is titled, Let Go of the Person I Was. Let go of the one totally in charge, the one who had no fear of falling or breaking an ankle, a leg, an arm, or worse, suffer a brain bleed. Let go of the one skilled at doing, being successful and productive, confident and self-possessed, able to handle most everything. Let go of the person whose alert brain easily recalled a name, a description, details of a story lodged in the past and where a precious item was placed. Let go of having a healthy, active body ready to obey and serve each command. Let go of energy once quick and plentiful, rarely collapsing with utter weariness. Greet this unwanted stranger's arrival, waiting to receive a respectful welcome. Get to know and accept her new traits. Do not shun, deny, reject, or criticize. Rather, behold with the gaze of kindness this one still looking over her shoulder, longing to be the woman she once was. Learn to love and appreciate her now, for she still bears the same loving spirit, still intends to live with zestful gratitude, still cherishes what is of utmost value, still retains a home in eternity's heart. You know, I know more and more people who talk about I don't know who I am, or I need to relearn who I am. I know a woman who's 86. Her husband died 2 years ago, and she has developing macular degeneration. And she said to me one day, she said, you know, my image of my life now, she said, I have to relearn who I am. She said, there's a strong vertical line right here. This is who I used to be up until 2 years ago. And now I'm learning, who am I now as a single person, as this person who will be visually disabled later on. And last year I was speaking at Wesley Acres on Vessels of Love, and a woman came up afterwards and she said, I just turned 80 this week, and I asked myself that very question, who am I now? I don't know who I am anymore. And you know, we go through that all through life, you know, as an adolescent, especially in midlife, but we go through it again in these years when things change so much. There's the loss, as I said, of people we love greatly, you know, through death. Physical changes happen. I mean, there's so many things. And so who am I now? Who is this person here? And so I think it's so important to reflect upon that and have other people, you know, reflect upon it too. And so I like talking about that because sometimes, maybe more than sometimes, we feel alone in what we're going through. And I've had people say, I thought I was the only person who was thinking that or feeling that till I read that in your book, and I realized I'm not the only one, you know. But it will happen, and it does happen, especially as a person moves from a life of activity, a life of being in relationship with someone for years and years, to being this other person that's here now. So, big change in that. Okay, then 2 more, and then I'll stop here. I have a chapter on spiritual transformation, and I want to read this piece. This is actually from The Wizard of Oz. And when I was reading this in The Wizard of Oz, it just struck me that this is so much of what's happening to older people. And read this a piece of it. So, in the film The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy's trying to find her way home, she asks Glinda the Good for a way to get there. Glinda replies, well, Dorothy, you were wise and good enough to help your friends to come here and find what was inside them all the time. That's true for you also. Dorothy expresses confusion and asks, home? Inside of me? I don't understand. Then comes the response that most of us in our elder years hopefully hear. Glinda explains, home is a place we all must find, child. It's not just a place where you eat or sleep. Home is knowing your mind, knowing your heart, knowing your courage. If we know ourselves, we're always home anywhere. And that, to me, is all about what inner transformation is about, is finding that home, you know, knowing ourselves, respecting ourselves, you know, accepting ourselves, being at peace, and really being transparent. So then the last chapter I have is on serenity. And, you know, I come back time and time again to the prayer of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I think that an older person could say that every single day because things change so much, and acceptance is just major, and that's really a big part of this chapter, is accepting what cannot be changed, but having the courage to change what I can, you know, and not giving up, not being passive about how I'm aging. But so there's a lot in the chapter about that. So I want to close with sharing for an epilogue. I always have to have the last word, you know. Anyway, so I wanted to kind of pull everything together, and I did it with 5 metaphors, because I love images and symbols and metaphors. And so as I thought about what I really wanted to bring together from this whole book, I thought about transitions, because, I mean, all through our life we're in transition. I mean, things are always changing. And so, you know, there's an ending, and then we're in the middle of something. We're not sure where we're going, and then we start off in another thing. it keeps happening over and over, but it's especially true, I think, in elderhood. So the first image that came to me was that of migration. My friends know that I'm enthralled with the concept of migration. And I came across a quote online, a little story really, of Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. And she was dying of cancer, and she was going for a walk with her friend Dorothy just a few months before she died. And they saw this gorgeous flock of monarchs, and they were in migration, they were flying, and they had a conversation about it. And Rachel said to Dorothy, isn't it something how we know that when the monarchs go, very few of them will ever come back again. They know that this is their final journey. And then Rachel went on and said how peaceful she was about that, because it was a natural cycle of life, this final transition that's happening. And it is, it is. I talk about that quite a bit in the chapter on death. Then the next metaphor that I use is a bridge, because we cross a lot of bridges in our life, but guess what? When you get to be 80, 90, there's the last bridge, And we don't know where we are in that bridge. Some are going to be really just kind of, early on that bridge, because they might live to be 106, which some people are today. Other people might be in the middle, or they might be moving toward the very end, depending on their health of mind, body, spirit. But so just being aware of being on that bridge and trusting that we'll get to the end and be peaceful about it when it's our time. Then the third image that I have in here is called The Old Interior Angel. David White is one of my favorite poets, and I've used this poem so many times because it just resonates for me. And so David White, it's a true experience of his, a life experience. He writes about being on this big trek somewhere in the Himalayas, and he deliberately got separated from the group because he had heard about this big bridge that went across this huge chasm, but he wanted to go around the other way while this group went this way, and he was going to meet them on the other side of that bridge. What he didn't know after he walked for 3 days is that bridge, it was a huge, deep thing. It was like, I forget that one in Colorado that goes in Colorado Springs. It was huge. Anyway, it didn't have any railings on it, not even any ropes on it, and there were some of the boards on it were broken. So he looked at it and he sat down and he thought, he just didn't know. He thought he was going to have to walk all those 3 days back and then all around the other side and come up and meet the group if they were still there. So he was sitting down and he was thinking about that and really losing heart. And this old Indian woman came, and she was picking up dung and putting it in her satchel. And he watched her, and she stopped and she gave namaste to him. And then she went right across that bridge and never hesitated one single bit. And he said, in that moment, in the poem, he says, at that moment, the old interior angel walked across, and that he knew he could do the same. And I love that image, because we have the resilience in us to live our lives to the very end, with whatever comes. And I just believe that with all my heart. So that's the old interior angel. Then the next image I have is one of a Zen garden. And William Marvin wrote this wonderful book called Grace Notes. And he took pictures, photos everywhere that he traveled, and then he'd take them home and do a watercolor of them. And I just love that book. And there's one called the Zen Garden, and it has this big willow, braided willows, and they form an arch, like a rainbow. And then underneath it is this huge boulder that's sitting there. And beyond it is this woods or forest. You can't see, you'll just see the trees there. And I thought, that is so much how I see elderhood, because we have to be very flexible, like those willows are, but we have to be really solid and foundational and sturdy and strong. And as we're in all of that, we cannot see what's there beyond us. We cannot enter that woods. We're not ready to do that yet. But I think being flexible and being strong at the same time will help us when it's our time to enter that. And then the last one I have in there is, I can't remember what I called that, but I'll describe it to you. Are ripened, solidly grounded in love soul. And so when I walk, I usually walk in the afternoons, but sometimes I walk in the mornings when it's warm like it is now. And I usually walk around Blue Heron Lake out at Raccoon River Park. And so when I walk in the morning, almost always I will meet this man. I'm sure he's got to be, at least mid-70s. And he looks kind of as tired and bedraggled as I am, kind of walking along, and I'll meet him. And the first time he did this, it just lifted my heart. But he always does this. He touches his heart with his hand like this, and then he holds it out and opens it up to me. And I just love that. And it says so much to me about just how I want to live my life as an older person, just this care and love and kindness in my heart and offering it out. And so I'm always ready when I see him. Oh, good, he's going to do it again. But anyway, so that's basically what's in the book. And I've probably overtalked a bit here, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of it. I am so glad that I wrote this book. It was a hard book to write in the sense that I wanted it to be comforting and inspiring for older people. But I didn't want it to be a cheerleader book. I do not like cheerleader books for older people. Eat right, do the right things, and you just, you can do bungee cord jumping, and you can, go out and mow your lawn at 105. And a few people can, but most of us are not going to be able to do that. And so to just encourage one another to say, it is a good life. It's different for us now, but it's a good life. So I'd love to hear from you and any connections and comments or any questions or differences. Although I said you're welcome to disagree with me, but I have the last word. Yes, yeah.
On your time spent with the ladies age 90 to 97, did any of them? I was a hospice nurse for a long while, and I had a group of patients that had nothing but regret towards the end of their life, saying they didn't accomplish what they wanted. And then I had, as a nurse, we would try to listen and then say, well, let's rather concentrate on what you have accomplished.
Yeah.
But my life pales in comparison to accomplishments to yours. As a prolific writer and a very proficient educator and loving person, who shares your wealth of knowledge. So how does one, when they start approaching end of life, feel I'm really satisfied with what I've accomplished in here and not question, did I do enough? Why didn't I change this? In other words, I think that word peace is a huge word.
It is. Yeah.
And I think that's what most people want to accomplish in their life, but it's unintangible for some.
Yeah. And that's where I think we really can help other people, because with this group, I think they all felt they'd all been teachers, and I think they did feel some sense of accomplishment. But I was just with a woman last week who's 97, and I asked the question, so what do you, this is from one of the prayers and vessels of life, says, so what is the good within the not so good for you as you age? She never answered that directly, but she said to me, as you get the age I am, you have so few years ahead of you, and you have so many behind you, so you spend a lot of time in the past. And she said, I've spent time in the past, and I've looked at choices and decisions I wished I had not made, but I know that I can't undo them, and so I'm coming to peace with that. And I think so, looking both at regrets and saying, yes, that was, but I'm moving on from it. But then I found it helpful you almost have to help people make a list of what they accomplished, because I have a friend who always wanted to do noble, great things. She was a mother of 4 children.
That's pretty noble.
I tried to get her to see that, and I said, if you do nothing else, nothing else with your life except raise these 4 children, which she did. They're beautiful adults. And I said, that is a fantastic accomplishment. But you see, it's always like, when we get into comparisons, that's when we get in big trouble, big trouble. So pulling back comparisons and getting respect for our own person, what happened for me in my life. And sometimes a little thing can be so big. I remember one time, I was probably about 60 then, and I was looking at my life, and one of our sisters, Sister Ambrose, said, one of the things I'll always remember is when you found a key for me to get into the high school so I didn't have to walk all the way around. That's my big accomplishment, But for her, it was major. For me, it was like, oh, I got a key for you. Anyway, so thank you for that. Yes.
I wondered if you might speak to the essence of passion in our lives.
Oh, passion, yes, the essence of passion. I think passion, obviously, it changes a lot, and passion for a lot of different things. But I'm a nature lover, so I can always be enthused and excited about a sunrise and a sunset, and when the birds return in spring, but many people just kind of sit back and they lose that enthusiasm for life. And so, that's a hard thing, I think, because to allow people their own journey. We cannot change people. We can invite them. But I know another person who is in a senior residence who does not partake in anything there. And he's miserable, but you cannot force people to do something that you think might be helpful for them. But certainly our enthusiasms change, and we don't have the energy we had, even if we want to go to a lot of things or take part. We can't, we have to really limit, how much we can do. Is that kind of addressing what you...
Yes, something, I don't know.
Do you want to say a little more about that?
Well, I don't know whether it's innate or something that we seek or accomplish towards. Do we work towards passion?
Yeah, is it innate or something we accomplish? I think maybe both. Although I think some people are much more, if you go through the different personality types, sanguine is one, and that's a person that just has never had lots of enthusiasm for life or lots of passion, So, yeah, some of it's inbuilt. Some people are wildly passionate. Just give me an Italian. I'm German, so hey, it is me. Anyone else? Those are great comments. Yes.
So, I recently retired, but I just was curious about discernment of, now that you have this time, one, I'm more tired than I ever used to be. It surprised me in retirement, but two, then how do you make sure you're doing the things that really matter? That you're not just getting caught up in, because everybody's like wanting your help all the time,
That's a huge question for people when they retire, and what you said.
Question.
Yeah, the comment was, first of all, just retiring not long ago and feeling so tired, so weary. And that is a part of it, because you don't let yourself feel weary or tired when you're pushing all the time in a job. But I think and the question so many people are asked, and when they retire and they get so tired of hearing it, is, so what are you going to do now? And then for yourself, as you said, the question is, but what do I do that has meaning? And my suggestion is, give yourself plenty of time. I've had friends who've given themselves a year or two before they decided what they could do that would be meaningful and helpful for the larger community. That's that pull between doing and being. I should be doing something. I'm gifted, or I have lots yet to give. But don't get caught in that, because then you just get in that cycle and you'll miss a lot of inner transformation possibilities. I think that would be my suggestion. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that who's here. But thank you for that. Yes.
My grandmother, I was so fortunate. She lived to be almost 102.
Oh.
And she had her mind till the end, and physically pretty good too. And she's amazing, and she was mostly a stay-at-home person her whole, and she raised her own daughters, she raised granddaughters, us, and she was so peaceful. And I remember thinking about the loneliness that you talked about. You know, by the time she was her age, almost everybody, peers, like, so she cultivated, you know, relationships with young people, and she was a great letter writer, and that's a lost art, I think, but she, you know, almost to the end would write letters to people, and she also said, when she would look at other people, she said, oh, there's, you know, those old people, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, they're like 20 years younger than you are, and she said, you know, one has to have, and maybe this is the inner transformation, one has to have an inner life, and she felt she had an inner life, and it was partly of being a woman of faith, but not exclusively that, and just that peace and contentment with who she was, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I love that description, and I'm so glad you said that, because if a person only lives in the external realm, it's difficult. It's difficult because peace really comes from here, you know, connecting with that in a way. I'm really glad you said that. You know, I thought of, maybe you've read this, but a woman she's either 101 or 103, and, you know, everybody was celebrating her birthday again, and they said, so what's so great about being your age? And she said, no peer pressure. So thank anyone else? Anything? Oh, you've been so good, and so is warm in here. So you're good. You're not sliding off your chair. So, yeah. So, Jan, thank you so much for how you set this up.
Absolutely.
And it's come to be here.